Late one winter evening, in a sprawling glass mansion that overlooked the city skyline, billionaire Richard Hale slammed the heavy oak door behind his maid, Clara. His voice had been sharp, filled with frustration that came from something deeper than just her spilled tea tray. "You're fired. Good riddance," he had barked, without even glancing at the tears gathering in her eyes. Clara had worked for him quietly, faithfully, for nearly 3 years. She was never late, never disrespectful, but tonight her hands had shaken, and the silver teapot had shattered against the floor. He saw it only as carelessness. She had opened her mouth to explain, but he had already turned away. The house felt cold, and yet he believed he had won a small battle for control. What Richard didn't know was that Clara's hands were trembling for a reason. She had been sick for months, her body growing weaker, but she couldn't afford to lose the job that paid for her treatments. She never told him. In her mind, he was too far above her world to understand her struggles. Outside in the icy air, she pulled her coat tighter, blinking back tears as she walked into the night, not knowing where else to go. Hours later, Richard sat in his study, sipping a glass of brandy, though it tasted bitter in his mouth. He had all the wealth in the world, luxury cars, companies across Canada and beyond, but the silence of his home pressed on him. He thought of Clara's face, the way her eyes always carried a quiet kindness, even when she was tired. For a moment he almost felt guilty, but his pride was stronger, so he pushed the thought away. Then the phone rang. The number was from the local hospital. Richard's chest tightened as he answered, unsure why they would be calling him. On the line, a nurse explained that Clara had collapsed on the street outside the mansion not long after leaving. In her phone, they found his number listed as her employer and emergency contact. Her condition was serious, they said. She needed help. Richard froze. For years, he had lived believing money solved everything, but in that moment he felt powerless. He remembered his harsh words, the way he dismissed her like she was nothing. Guilt crashed into him, heavier than any business loss he had ever faced. Without hesitation, he grabbed his coat and rushed to the hospital. When he arrived, Clara lay unconscious, her skin pale against the white sheets. Machines beeped steadily beside her bed. Richard stood there, suddenly stripped of all arrogance. For the first time in years, his eyes stung with tears. The nurse explained that Clara had been working despite her illness, trying to afford treatments she couldn't fully pay for. Richard's stomach twisted. She had been fighting quietly while still serving him with dignity. He sat by her bedside for hours, whispering words she couldn't hear. He remembered how she had once left small notes in the kitchen reminding him to eat when he worked too late, or how she hummed softly when cleaning, filling the empty halls with warmth. He realized she hadn't just been a maid. She had been a presence of care in his cold, lonely home. The following morning, Clara opened her eyes, weak but alive. She was startled to see him there, slouched in a chair, his hair disheveled, his eyes red. Richard leaned forward and spoke softly, a voice unlike the one she had heard the night before. "Clara, I am so sorry. I was blind. I thought money made me powerful, but it only made me cruel. Please forgive me." Clara, though exhausted, gave him the faintest smile. "You don't owe me anything," she whispered. "Just be kind to people who need it." Those words sank into him deeper than any boardroom lecture ever had. Over the weeks that followed, Richard covered every cost of Clara's treatment. But it didn't stop there. He began donating anonymously to hospitals, funding care for those who couldn't afford it, remembering how Clara's strength had gone unnoticed until it nearly cost her life. His mansion was no longer silent. He invited family he had long ignored, workers he once overlooked, creating a home where kindness, not wealth, had value. The world saw him as a billionaire, but he began to see himself simply as a man who had almost lost his chance to do good. Clara recovered slowly, and though she chose not to return as his maid, she became his friend. She even teased him once, saying, "Firing me was the best thing you ever did, because it woke you up." Richard laughed, but inside he knew she was right. The story spread quietly in whispers through the community, not of a billionaire's wealth, but of his change of heart. In the end, Richard learned a lesson many forget, that the true measure of a life is not in riches, but in the compassion we show when it matters most. And for Richard Hale, it took losing Clara to finally see the wealth of kindness he had ignored all along.